All right. Thanks so much for being on this podcast with me. I appreciate it. First off, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the work that you do today?
Sure. My name is Deborah Nichols. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been working in mental health for over a decade, but in private practice for about 8 years now, since 2018. I primarily specialize in working with mothers, doing perinatal mental health, with an emphasis in women who experience anxiety. But I also, there's a component of the work that I do and have done in special education advocacy. And that work has come from my own experience as a mother of two children we've been navigating the special education system for years, their entire academic history. So it's kind of a mix of a professional and personal experience that has led me to work with mothers of children who need special education services and helping them navigate the systems and advocacy, but also kind of rebelling against the societal and social norms that mothers are subjected to, um, in terms of their role in their families.
So let's talk about those two areas in detail. Let's start with the prenatal mental health aspect first, because I've never heard of this. What are the components that go into that?
Yeah. Well, so a lot of times, right, when women go through pregnancy and give birth in the first 18 months of having children, the combination of just their natural tendencies towards anxiety and depression, coupled with hormonal shifts, sleep deprivation, nutritional challenges, those types of things, just the toll and the demand on a woman after giving birth, can often create an intense experience of anxiety, which looks like intrusive thoughts that are very what we call ego dystonic. So they don't match. So a woman might have a thought that she's in the kitchen preparing a meal and she'll stab her baby, which is totally not in line with the type of person she is, and it can be really distressing for new moms in particular as they're navigating um, having newborn babies. So, and that's something that is not talked about very much. There's a lot of focus in the medical field around postpartum depression. So, an
Mhm.
intense depression that women experience after giving birth, but the anxiety piece, which goes right along with it, is often overlooked in a lot of the screening tools and not talked about. So, women end up suffering silently and honestly feeling like they're losing their minds. So I do a lot of work around that, and it can create some obsessive compulsive disorder in the postpartum period. And every pregnancy is different. So I have women who I've worked with through multiple pregnancies. Maybe they've experienced this in one pregnancy and not in another. So it's not necessarily a given or not after a birth of a child.
hmm so because you work in prenatal mental health, what sorts of modalities do you use for this particular sort of for this particular population, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say that the way I conceptualize the work, or the philosophy that I come from most often, is cognitive behavioral therapy, which can be really useful. But I also incorporate some acceptance commitment therapy, also called ACT. And I use EMDR, which is a trauma treatment, because there's a lot of what we call little t trauma that can happen throughout the process of pregnancy, labor, delivery, right? So there is a space for also using trauma intervention, and a lot of mindfulness, right? A lot of it is not about getting rid of the anxiety, but more noticing it, managing it. And it's very, very effective. It's very treatable. And there's
hmm
also, and I work in conjunction with medication providers as well, if that's needed. So a lot of times it's a combination of pharmaceutical treatment with cognitive behavioral therapy as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch gears and talk about the special education aspect of this as well. So what do you do on that front?
So I did spend a lot of time working in a primary care setting, medical setting, doing advocacy. So, working with families and being representative as an advocate for them in IEP meetings. I think when families have children who need special education services, whether that be so my area of specialty is in dyslexia, so dyslexic learning. But it also applies to other areas like ADHD or even autism spectrum disorder, right? I think families get really overwhelmed with all the nuances of the system, and it's very hard to understand what their rights are, what they can ask for. So I even had a bit of I did an advocacy work as a private business for a while where I just really worked with families to understand the special education system, how it works, what their rights are, what they can ask for, and how children are qualified. So the process is so lengthy that it gets really confusing for families that don't really know kind of where their rights are in that system.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've been a part of those IEP meetings, but like how was it, being involved in those meetings? I bet it was like very lengthy and kind of like hard to sort of sift through because a lot of parents with special needs, they have to sift through those meetings and they're like, "What? Well, what's
Yes.
this mean?" Or how do I, you know?
Yes, it's very overwhelming. And like I mentioned, I came to it, because I am a parent, right? So when my older son, who's now 20, was in kindergarten, I knew something was going on, right? And I was constantly told by the school, oh, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. And I knew that there was something not adding up, and I really had to become a fierce advocate and educate myself around the processes, right? And it's a lot. It's a lot. There's all these nuances and free and appropriate public education and these terms, and it can people can just get lost in a sea of that. And I think it's so nice as an advocate. What was so nice was to be able to sit alongside families and hear the information and be able to know how to direct them in asking for what they need and recognizing. So my philosophy, and this is a personal philosophy, but I really do believe this, that as a parent, you're the expert. The parent is the expert on what their child needs ultimately. And I think we forget that sometimes when we're in a room and we're overwhelmed and we're being told, what someone thinks, should be off, what the accommodation should be. But as the parent, really, my role was always to empower the parent to be the expert in the room. And to see the school as a team, like we're a team together. But I think sometimes parents feel as though that the expert is everyone else. And so I
Hmm.
really come to it with um, the the mindset that the parent knows what's best for their child and what their child needs ultimately, and that they have the right to advocate for that. And that's my role, is to come alongside them. But yeah, it's overwhelming. There's so much, and also not to mention, right, when you have a child that has a learning disability or has a challenge, or their brain processes information differently, you're not just dealing with IEP meetings, right? You're also at home, and it's overwhelming at home because parents are always trying to, support their children as best they know how.
Yeah.
And
Eh,
there's not a manual for that.
there's no manuals for that, exactly.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm glad that you said that you were able to find other parents, who were in the same situation because a lot of these parents, they don't know where to go. They don't know who to turn to.
that's right. And I always thought of my advocacy as being like making way for, I always wondered, like, gosh, I was the kind of parent who didn't accept the answer of, oh, he's fine, it's fine, he's fine. I never accepted that. I always knew in myself that I needed to pursue and push. But I always think about, there's so many parents out there that don't know or they don't have the resources to be able to push back if they need. And so I always saw my advocacy work as opening up doors, for other people who, might not have the ability or the resource to know the information. So I hope that I could, I felt like my children were always going to be advocated for by me, but I hope that, showing it, and I did a lot of education with the school around dyslexia because there wasn't a lot of people don't know the nuances
Mm-hmm.
of it and what it actually looks like.
Right. And so given your experience, being in those IEP meetings, being there, advocating for your son, how are you showing up for other folks in that same situation where they have to advocate for their sons and daughters with special needs?
Yeah, so one of the things I did at the elementary school level was a lot of education. So during school in service, I always asked the principal, could I go and educate the teachers on kind of what the nuances of a dyslexic learner looks like, how they could support in the classroom, but also advocated for there was like software that I encouraged the school to bring into the classroom as part of my son's IEP. But the thing about it was there were 6 kids in the class using it, right? Not just my son. So I always tried to advocate for bringing resources into the school that could not only help support my son and his needs, but also other children who might not have identified needs, appropriately identified needs. And also, like I said, just educating parents on what their rights are, what they can ask for. Also, the differences between a 504 plan and an IEP plan. Like people don't understand the nuances of what those two things are and how the qualification works. There's all these different categories under which children can qualify. So an ADHD falls under a category called other health impairment, while ASD, autism spectrum, falls under a different category where dyslexia falls under another category called specific learning disability. So
Mhm.
just really it's more about, I think my advocacy work was more about educating other families on these different parts of the system and then empowering them to be the expert on their own kid.
Mm-hmm. And my next question is, what have you learned in doing this kind of work? First in the prenatal mental health aspect, but also the special education aspect, because you work in both of those areas. So I'm wondering what you've learned.
I mean, I would say, and this is a theme that across both, right? Is that it's so important for people to have a sense of not being alone in this, to recognize that they're not alone, that there are other families, other women, right, that are experiencing the same things that we are. Our culture um, creates such a feeling of shame
Hmm.
around the experience of anxiety. And also there's still, as much as I'd like to believe that there's not, I think there's still stigma around special education,
Yeah.
right? And so I think I mean, my goal in both of my areas of work is to remove the stigma around sharing. Like we are taught to suffer in silence, and that is not helping anybody.
Mm-mm.
And so I think just putting it out there, making it known, saying it out loud, for people to recognize that many, many people struggle in these ways. And there's power in recognizing that you're not alone in it, and that there's no stigma, there's no shame in having a child with special education needs. There's no shame in being a child with special education needs. There's no shame in experiencing anxiety and in motherhood. Like there are so many joys of motherhood, and there's a lot of really, really hard parts. and it's okay to not enjoy every moment of motherhood, right? And so kind of that's what I've learned. Like we need to remove the stigma and the shame and talk about it, put it
Mm-hmm.
out there.
You bring up this concept about stigmas around disability and all that stuff, but what are some of the common misconceptions that go around for that are sort of circled around in the disability sort of space, and what can be done to sort of flip that and create a more positive sort of
Yeah.
framework, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, my area of the most knowledge is in dyslexic learners, dyslexia. But I mean, the biggest stigma there is that there's a cognitive deficiency, right? So the misconception is that if someone is a dyslexic learner, that they are cognitively deficient, like they're not smart or they're stupid or something. And it's actually like it's so the opposite. Dyslexic learners are vastly intelligent, very intelligent. It's just a difference in how their brain processes the written word, right? And so that's a misconception for sure that a dyslexic learner is not an intelligent human, right? They are wildly intelligent people, oftentimes superior intelligence, just a difference in how the brain processes information, which is the same with an ADHD, right? It's just a difference in how information is processed, and the education system is not built to support a dyslexic learner. Our education system is, kind of built to work towards the middle here, and kids on either end or outside of the mainstream, so to say, learning style are not supported as well. So I think part of the work is to empower our children and so that they know, the truth, so that they can actually um, own it and utilize the accommodations that support them without feeling shame or stigma around that.
My next question is, now that we're on this subject, how do you think the role in like media and like TV and movies and stuff portray people with disabilities? Because I remember one time I watched the movie, I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's called Me Before You. I don't know if you've heard.
I do think I've seen that. Jog my memory really quick.
It was about a movie about a quadriplegic person,
Yes.
and then he falls in love with his caretaker,
Yes.
and then they engage in a whirlwind romance, but then he doesn't feel like he's part of society, or there are like sort of societal sort of constraints on him that he cannot, that they don't allow it, I guess, basically.
Yeah, I did see that movie. What are your thoughts about it? I'm just curious.
What are my thoughts about the movie? My thoughts about the movie is that it was kind of, I didn't like the ending. It was sad. I
Yeah.
kind of, it wasn't, sort of an uplifting kind of movie,
Right.
but it just felt sad, and that the guy had to like commit suicide, and where he like kind of left a note for his wife or
Hmm.
something. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. I think it all, I think our society um, is geared towards kind of the middle. If I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but kind
Hmm.
of like I was talking about our education system, right? It's like it's there's this attempt, right, to have a one size fits all. And I don't think humans are one size fits all. And I think when you are someone who experiences a disability or experiences anything outside of what is considered typical or normal, right? We tend it's about having a lack of understanding, I think, of the experience, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think we could do better. I think we could do better.
Yeah.
I think
Hmm.
I think it's like people, like you putting out this content on the podcast, and the more we talk about the experience, the more we destigmatize and normalize, right? The better we're gonna be.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's also another movie, like I'm a huge movie buff, by the way.
I love that.
I love movies. There's another movie called I think Wonder, where there's this about this kid that he has a
Oh,
facial deformity,
yes.
and it was a really uplifting and inspiring story. So I thought it was good too. I think they wrote a book about it as
Yeah, it was
well.
a great book. It was a great book. I read the book first with my kids. It was a book that they read in school, I think in their elementary school
Wow.
years. I think the role of media, to kind of go back to your question, and social media in particular,
Uh-huh.
is that people are so unfiltered, right?
Yeah.
Like hiding behind a screen or hiding behind an Instagram handle, I think gives people no pause to think about how what their comments or their feedback is going to impact. Like I think people forget that there's a human being attached on the other end. And we
Yeah.
call it like an inhibition effect, right? Like
Hmm.
people lose their inhibition when they can just make a nasty comment on Instagram or a horrendous comment because there's not like they're hiding behind a screen. And I think it's really detrimental because especially our young people are so connected to the world of social media. And we forget that what you're seeing on social media is just a small snapshot of someone's whole life.
Yeah, it's an addiction.
Yeah, and people find it so easy to just spew negativity and terrible things because they're hiding behind a an Instagram handle, something that someone probably would think twice about saying directly to a person in front of them.
Yeah, I remember one time someone said to me, I don't have social media because like why would I post some what I had for breakfast on social media?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really need to know, right? What
Yeah.
everybody's having for breakfast.
Yeah, that was really funny. So anyway, is there anything that you still like to learn in terms of something new? Either in the prenatal stuff or the special education realm?
Always. I always want to learn new things. I mean, I think that there's so, I mean, I think you're never done learning about ways to support people, ways to advocate, right? And also keeping, especially in the special education realm, I think like there's always changes that are happening, right? So always things to learn there, new technologies, like technology, it can be so hard, but it's so amazing. Like I think about for my sons, right? If they were growing up 20 years ago, the options were so minimal. Now they have speech to text and all the things that really can support them. So I think learning about all the new technologies that come out, so important. Yeah, and then just ways to support mothers. Like I think in that realm, like there's always work to be done in creating community, right? Creating spaces for mothers and women in their mothering journeys, right? To go and feel supported and not be so alone. So I think those are the two areas
Mm-hmm.
that are super important.
Was there sort of like a mentor that you sort of looked up to in the special education space or the in the prenatal mental health space that you sort of thought I want to do this work? Because in the special education space, the first person that comes to mind is Judy Human because she was a huge sort of advocate in the
Mhm.
disability community and all that stuff.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I felt I mean, in the years that I was knee deep in it for myself as a mom, I felt a little bit on an island, but there was a group called Decoding Dyslexia. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a group of a kind of a grassroots group. They have them in all different states. I'm in Oregon. And I did find a lot of community there, and they're really focused on legislative changes. So, passing bills in the legislature to support early detection and early testing and those kind of things. That was super helpful. And that really pushed me forward into my advocacy there. In terms of the perinatal mental health and postpartum support, I feel like that kind of came to me. I had a lot of anxiety with my second son, and I could have really used a me. a therapist that was specialized in this and could really give me the information to know that I wasn't completely losing my mind. And so I think a lot of it, and probably a lot of people you talk to, I mean, I think it really comes from our own life experiences and what
Yes.
we would have had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that for sure.
Yeah, finally to wrap this up, like what tips and advice would you give to those who want to go into the prenatal mental health side or the special education side of things?
I would say you're needed. It's so needed. Um, and people, like I said, families and women, right? They just need to know that they're not alone. And so if there's anyone who's interested in going into this work or starting to do more advocacy, like you are so needed. Anytime I tell someone what I do, they go, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness for you. We need you," right? So we need more people out there doing this work, as many as we can. It's important work. And
Hmm.
humans aren't one size fits all, and there's no stigma around any of it. Like we need to really remove the stigma. It's huge. I really want to rebel against that, and I would encourage anybody who's thinking about it to join me in the rebellion. It's really important.
It's a lot of hard work for sure.
Absolutely. We need more people like you doing this and, putting it out there. So we need to talk about it.
Yep. Okay.